Hi, Kathy here from Eclectic Images, and thanks for joining me. Today we're going to be messing around with some of the new Catherine Pooler ink colours and with some different watercolour techniques. Making a bit of a mess actually, but it's going to be fun. Okay, so let's see what we're going to be using today. So in our Eclectic stamps and Uniquely Creative stamps, so Eclectic stamps, we're using the Happy Flower set and the Detailed Flower set, and a bit of one of our old favourites, webbing texture, to create some background texture. Combining that with a sentiment out of the Sweet Sentiments Builder set from Uniquely Creative, which has got a couple of big words and loads of smaller ones, so it's great for building whatever you want to say on a card. Now our inks that we're using are, as I said, some from the new Catherine Pooler range. The Cove Blue and Merlot are in the Beach Resort collection. Merlot's only just been released and it's very exciting. And then I thought I want a lighter colour to blend with those. So I got my Spa collection colour chart out and had a look, where does Merlot appear here? And so I can easily see, and Matthew's probably going to get a nice close-up for me there, so I can easily look through the other colours that are in the Spa collection, in the reds, and see what colours are going to blend really well with that Merlot. So I can see Rose Petals is in there, or Pink Champagne, and I've chosen to go with Rose Petals. And if we looked at a triad of colours, from our reds, we go directly across to our blues, and here we've picked Cove Blue from that set to work with as well. Okay, so this Spa collection and the Party collection colour charts are available on the website for you to be able to just download for free, and it just does help with choosing your colours. Right, so let's create some background to start with. Okay, now what I'm going to do for this is just get some of the Cove Blue and some of the Merlot and pop them onto my mat. And I'll just move some of the other colours out of the way a bit for the moment. And we're going to do some dribbles first with those, then we'll add some rose petals in with it. But I might as well put that down on the mat ready anyway, so I'll put the rose petals there ready. Okay, I'm using my water spritzer. So what I'm going to do is, to start off with, just use my water brush though. I want to create some dribbles down the card. So rather than spritzing it with water, which would make the inks splash out, I want to create more definite drips. So what I'm going to do, and I'm actually just not even going to use the water from in the water brush, I'm actually dipping it into a water receptacle so that I can get it really drippy. And then popping on my card, and I'm actually cheating. I'm going to do a little bit of a run to show the ink where I want it to go. So add a bit of water, do a bit of a run, and just guide it a little bit, because I don't want it to just, as I said, I don't want it to just splash out everywhere. So let's add a little bit, another water run, and then we'll add a bit of Cove Blue in there. And just let those dribbles in, because they tend to take off and do their own thing a little bit too much. So I wanted to have a little bit more control over it. I know it sounds very unwatery colory to have control. So wet the brush, dribble on a bit of water, add a bit of your colour and let it run. And I want these ones to go further down the card and these ones less. Now that doesn't look very good at the moment, that's okay. So I'm just going to dab that off lightly with my paper towel just to stop that from running now. And this is where the Pink Champagne is going to come in. We're now going to smoosh a little bit of background colour on our card. I'm looking at my stamping being around this part of the card and my sentiment being down here where it's a bit clearer. So I'm going to be adding most of my colour up this part of the card. So now I'll spritz where I put that Pink Champagne on and the other two colours, the Merlot and the Cove Blue. But first we're just going to grab some of the Pink Champagne colour. So I'll wipe the card through and lift it up, and we can just dab off with our paper towel. We can spritz, now we can spritz with a bit of water, get a bit more spread. Take a little bit more. Okay, that's giving us a little bit of a nice backgroundy wash there. Let's start deepening it a bit with the other colours. So I'm going to spritz my card and then lay it into, so I've got the darker one here going to the lighter blue, and I want you guys to be able to see what I'm doing. So I'm going to put it in that way and then flip up this way. So you can see how those colours start to take shape on the card. Now that's spreading nicely into where I'd already spritzed the card with water, so I don't want to mess with that, but I'd like a little bit more across the top here. So I'm just going to spritz that top half of the card, lay it in the colour, pick up and see what I've got. That looks pretty good. Just dabbing off a little bit with my paper towel. Now we're going to add some extra brushed colour on around the edges and stuff as well. So I'm mainly looking at how's my colour working here. Do I need a little bit more? And I think yes is the answer there. So a bit of spritzing of water. Let's pop it into our colours and lift up and see what we've got. Big dribble, where I could have done without a big dribble. That's okay, we'll add some more texture there. Let's just add a bit more at the top part of the card. I think we'll be happy with that. Okay, so now we're going to stamp over the top of that. Before we do though, we're just going to clean up our mat a bit, but I'm not going to clean it all up because I'm still going to use a little bit of that later. Which means, of course, I've got to be very careful I don't smush other things into it and make a mess. Would I make a mess? Yes, definitely. Definitely make a mess. Nearly even just tip the mat off onto the floor. That would make a definite mess. Okay, so I've actually got another bit of card that I've already prepared and dried because we now either leave that one to dry or dry it with a heat gun. So rather than stopping to do that, I've got one that's already dried for us. So now we're going to do our stamping. And for this, I'm going to use our Versafine Clear inks because these will dry waterproof. So that means we can keep doing watercolour effects with the Catherine Pooler inks and our stamping with these ones isn't going to move. So using the, is it Chianti or Chianti? Chianti, I think is how you pronounce it. And the large daisy flower from the Happy Flower set, which it's a bit hard to see with mine because it's been used and used and used, but it's this flower here, this daisy one. And I'll also be using the smaller daisy one as well. Okay, so let's stamp, and we will stamp and mask as we go. So ink up our stamp, pop it in there, press down. This is a pigment ink, so make sure you've given it time to nicely absorb into the card. And then we can pop our mask over the top. So the masks I've already made and cut out. Now this particular daisy has two shorter petals that makes it really easy to look at where you're lining up your mask. Okay, we're going to stamp another one of those. Now I've got a little bit of ink on my block there. Matthew's phone's buzzing, but I'm going to keep talking and we'll ignore that. Yeah, a little bit of ink there, which I've just wiped off before I get it smudging onto my card. So ink up again, stamp in another bloom, and I'm just going to move this one around so I don't end up with the petals facing the same way as before. Again, let it sit on the card for a moment and lift up. Now the masks I've made by stamping onto a post-it note and then cutting them out. So I'll just look for those shorter, fatter petals, and then my mask will line up nice and neatly. There we go. When you go to the trouble to make a mask, keep it and keep using it over and over again. Let's ink up our smaller flower, and we'll pop one here and one up the top here. Again, I've made masks for those, so you can layer those over, and then we can keep stamping. Going to do another one coming down from there, and then we'll pop some of the leaves and the texture in the background. Now close the lid on the Chianti there, and we mask this one. So now we can bring in our leaf from the detailed flower set, and I'm just going to use the Pinecone. Just check that I haven't got any ink on the edge of that block before I even start. And let's put some leaves coming back from this flower here. And at this point, I'm actually going to bring up my scratch pad and try very hard not to wipe it in all that ink that I still want to keep and use, but just so I can be stamping off the edge of the card. So let's pop one in there. Pop another one going the other way. We'll have one coming in along the top here, and one down the side, coming in around those flowers. Now I'm going to do the webbing texture in the same colour, but this time we'll stamp off on our scrap first, so we're doing a second generation stamping. This will keep it a little bit softer. So ink up, stamp off, and then come on with just that little bit of texture happening. You can even stamp twice on the card, so you get a third generation inking. Third generation stamping. In there. I'm just going to swap the stamp around. So I've just turned the stamp, so I'm now, I was stamping that end. I've turned it around, so I'm going to ink this end this time. That will give me a different pattern coming through, because I don't want all the little tendrils being the same. I'll do one more just at the back here. Now our leaves are getting covered with texture. We could mask those if we wanted to, but I actually want them being more of the background, so I'm happy for them to be covered in a bit of texture there. Okay, now while we've still got this masked, let's put our scratch pad away and add some splatters. So for this is where I'm going to use this extra ink that I've still got on the table. So I'll wet my fan brush, dip it into that ink, and with the handle of another brush, we're just going to tap across our card. If I'm too wet, which I am, I'm getting very big blobs, I'll just dry the fan brush a bit. Make sure I've got plenty of colour on my brush. And get some of those splats happening. So depending on the angle that you flick your brush, your splats will look different. So experiment with how you do it. Okay, just pop those brushes to one side, and now I can come in and clean up all this mess. So that means we're making the most out of that ink that we put onto our craft mat. Now we can take a look. Oh, we've got some blobs there, so I'm just going to dry those off with another bit of paper towel before we start doing extra colouring and stuff, just so that we don't end up smudging them everywhere. Okay, now it's time to take the masks off. Now these masks were made with a sticky note pad that's sticky over the whole lot, which can make them a little bit tricky to get off. But I find if I just bend them slightly, I can usually lift them away okay. And last one. I am trying to take them off carefully because I want to be able to reuse these masks several times. I'm trying not to tear them. Okay, now we've got to look at how it's going to come up with our flowers. Now while that's still drying, let's stamp our sentiment. So I've already lined up "Thanks for making me smile" on my block. And now when I'm looking at it over my card, I'm just wondering whether I need the thanks moved over a little bit more. So we're going to lift that up and just pop it a bit more over the top of the other sentiment, and then again have a look at how that's fitting with our picture, and I think that's really good. It's just coming a little bit into the decorative area and then going into the cleaner area as well. Now I did use, to line this up, I did use a bit of lined paper to get that part of the sentiment straight. And let's go again with our Chianti ink. And just checking whether I've inked up the whole stamp, and I hadn't. I'd missed a little bit at the top there. And line up the "for making me smile," I'm lining that up with the bottom edge of the card so that I get it straight. Now if it didn't come on straight, what I would do would be to trim the edges of the card off to make it straight. Cheat, totally. Press down nice and firmly, don't wobble, especially with lettering, and then lift straight up, and we should get a nice crisp image with no smudging. Okay, now let's bring our scratch pad back, and we're going to start. We could actually leave that card just like that. That is absolutely stunning. We could add just some edging colour to it, and this is where I'm going to use the new ink pad holders for our Catherine Pooler inks. And they've got a magnetic strip down the side, so you can actually put them together. They've got little rubbery feet on the bottom, and that helps to stop them from sliding around on your table. So this is a really good way of putting your ink pads out and they're not going to slide around. And you can pop the lid there. Now, I'm just going to give that lid a clean because I really don't want to get, I know, they're going to get inky, but at this stage, I'm trying not to get those all inky. And if I pop the lid there, I can easily see what colour I'm using, because once you've got a couple of colours out, it can get very difficult to tell what colour's what. So if we pop those two out, we can just see exactly what we're working with. So I'm going to grab one of my number 10 brushes and just pick up some of this beautiful Merlot ink and start doing some shading around the edge of the card. And then we'll see if that's where we want to stop. You know, I think it's not, but I want to give you that option. When do we ever stop until it's absolutely the end of the time that we've got allotted and we have to stop?
You don't even stop then, you keep going once we stop recording.
I do. I often do little extra bits so I can then photograph the card. I'll mount it up and do stuff so I can photograph it and add it to the description of the clip or as our thumbnail picture. See that? So you can see now our drips are just nicely in the background and everything else is coming out from that. But I'm wanting to add some more to it. So let's pick up a little bit of our Cove blue, take a bit off the brush, and we're just going to add some colour to these flowers here. I could, if I wanted to be more precise, I could actually do a reverse mask that would go around that. But I'm thinking if I just add it mainly to the centre part of the flower, it's just going to create a really gentle bit of colour. Now, can we do this with this Merlot that's so rich? Let's touch a bit off. So giving the flower some colour, but there's still some of the mottliness of the watercolour background that we created still showing through. So I'm using the brush fairly gently on the card. And now I'm actually going to do a little bit of watercolouring directly onto the centres of the flower there. Or am I? Or am I? No, let's just keep doing it with dry brushes actually. I'm just going to grab a smaller size brush. So this is where some of our number 2 size brushes could be really useful. We'll pick up a bit more of the Merlot. And I'm just picturing where a light source might be. So if we imagine it's coming from this side, it means that this side of the flowers is going to be more shaded. So let's just dab some in. So we could do this watercolouring, or we can do it with the dry brush. And if I need my big brush just to smooth things over, that's okay. And of course, if you're doing it and you think, oh, that's too heavy, I'm not happy with it, it's water-based ink. It's water-reactive water-based ink. So if you think, oh, I'm not happy with that, come in with your water brush and change it. So I'm going to try and do one just with dry and one with the water brush so you can see the two. And let's just keep dabbing that in gently. Okay, so we'll leave that one like that because that's blended beautifully. Let's grab our water brush and just soften this one out a bit with our water brush. So remember, the inks that we've used underneath for the actual stamping of the flower is the Versafine Clear, so it's not going to move as we do things like this. But if we start watercolouring, then we're going to need this a little bit of ink off this ink pad. I don't want to dip my brush directly into the ink pad. So I'm just going to lift it out of there, and I can lift the lid up as well. And we may as well, we're not using the Cove blue again, so I'll pop the lid back on that one, and let's pop them to one side. I'll put a little bit of my ink on my mat there, and then I can pick up some with that water brush and keep adding some colour in until we get that just how we want it. So we want a bit of a highlight where our light source is coming in, going into the deeper colour at the base there. So you may prefer to do it with the shaded, or you might prefer to do it with the watercolouring. I actually think the watercolouring is more dramatic. So let's actually change this one up a bit as well. So let's add our water into that one. Pick up a bit of colour, paint a bit on, clean our brush and move it back out of the way. So we get that lovely, we're getting a really nice transition. It really makes those flowers pop, doesn't it? Makes them 3D. So okay, let's add some Cove blue in there as well to the others, hoping that we're still going okay for time. I don't want you guys having to watch this forever. So let's just grab some little bits, and I'll turn my card around so that I'm painting right up to the edge of the design where I want to. Clean my brush and just blend that out a little bit. I'm going to switch to my smaller brush because there's a very tiny little flower centres here. So I'll also pop a bit in that one. Now we don't have any embossing here, so if I put too much water on, it is going to ooze everywhere over my design. So I am trying to be a little bit careful with how much water I've got on the brush. Moving that away, but I still want a bit more depth, so let's grab a bit more of our Cove blue. I gave my brush too much of a squeeze and it's way too wet. So I've just given it a dry there. Okay. Now that is looking very cool. Just giving it a moment to dry because there's one last bit that I want to add. Let's get the scratch pad out of there because it's looking very messy. Give our work area a clean, and then I'm going to grab a white gel pen and just bring in some highlights. I think that's what it needs. But before that, sorry about the noise, we're just going to make sure we dry all this off. So a quick go with the heat gun. So again, we're going to think, where's our light source coming from? So if it's coming from here, it's going to be the top edges of these petals facing towards there that are going to pick up on get a bit of highlight. So let's just add in and we'll also pop in some bits on our flower centres, and let's put in some little highlights on those blue ones as well, and that's really going to pick up those little petals. And I think that is enough. I'm actually going to stop there. I love how by giving us the transition in the ink colours in the centre of the flower and then the highlights, doesn't that just make those pop? So that's us layering some colour with some watercolouring, not trusting myself to get drips to just happen where I want them, so I made them happen as I wanted them, and then just adding the rest of the shading around. So although it looked a bit odd with the drips to start with, you can see how once you add all the rest of the stamping and the colouring in, it all just fits in to help create that background look. So I hope you like that one, a little bit messy and playing around with some of these beautiful new ink colours. So I hope you're going to have a bit of a play with yourself as well. We do have them available on the website and the re-inkers available for them too. So I hope you enjoy having a play with these colours and these techniques, and we'll see you again next time for some more crafting with Kathy.